Stay away from me. You are the cause of my problem. You know that I don't have a life of my own. Yet, you gave birth to me when you know I can't live my life. So, Mama, you plan to sacrifice me to what I don't know. You don't want me to ever get married and live a complete life. You want me to live a single life like you with no husband. Mama, your idol wants me to sleep around with men and not get married to any of them. My name is Amara and I am 20 years old. I'm the only child and daughter of my parents. Although my dad is late, he died when I was 8 years old. Although life isn't fair, but my mom chose not to remarry and she take good care of me. My mom had a restaurant where she sells and cook food. Mom was a good cook, so her restaurant was always filled with customers. Due to stress of running a restaurant, my mom hired sales girls. Mom had about 4 girls working for her. Nkechi was among my mom's sales girls, but she was my best friend. We live in Enugu State. Apart from our normal life, something strange was happening to me every night. I noticed this since the day I clocked 20 years. Anytime I close my eyes to sleep, I always see myself in the dream with a woman. The woman would always dress me up in a white wrapper and another white wrapper tied on my head like a gala cap. Once she's done dressing me in white attire, she would then bring a chair and ask me to sit close to her. Once I sit, different kinds of beautiful girls with different designs on their skin would appear around me and start calling me their princess. At first, I thought these dreams was just my imagination, but when it became a regular dream, I told my mom about it, but my mom waved it aside, saying it was my imagination. But it didn't stop. It became worse. The moment I started seeing the lady physically, most times, she would appear to me and ask me to come to visit her in her home. The shock of seeing her always made me speechless. I don't know what to do. No one believes me when I try to explain to them what I'm going through. I had come to the backyard to ease myself when she came again. I guess I was lost in seeing her before Nkechi came to meet me. I followed Nkechi into the restaurant. Immediately, my mom saw me. She made a sign for me to come. Already, Nkechi was standing by her side. It seems she told my mom what happened. I walked to meet my mom. My mom dropped the money she was holding and touched my neck. She used warm hands to open my eyes, as if she was checking signs of fever. Amara, what is it? What is happening to you? Nkechi said she saw you standing like a statue. My mom asked, being worried. I looked at Nkechi. My mom understood and asked Nkechi to leave us alone. Amara, Oya, talk to your mother. What is it? Kedeyo. My mom asked me, making me to sit on her lap. Although I am 20 years old, but my mom still treats me like a baby. Mom doesn't mind the fact that I'm a grown-up girl. She will still carry me on her lap whenever she wants to talk to me. Amara, I am waiting. Tell me, what is it? I told my mother about my encounter with this strange woman. I told my mother about her frequent visitation and request. My mother listened attentively without interruption. When I was done, I looked at my mother to see if she believed me, but my mom's face was emotionless. Amara, how long has this thing been going on? My mother asked me. It's almost 5 months now, Mama. Amara, don't tell anyone about this. I know what to do, my mother said. I nodded my head in reply. She asked if I have eaten and I said no. Oya, go and check the fridge. I packaged jollof rice and salad and chicken for you. Go and eat it. Thank you, Mama, I said and dashed off to go and eat. Advantage of having a mom who owns a restaurant. I get to eat fresh food anytime I want. After the day's sales, we went home. My mother and I lived in a 2-bedroom flat owned by my late father. We took our beds and ate our supper and went straight to bed. I slept thinking of how my mother would be able to solve the mystery at hand. At 4:30 a.m., I felt someone tapping me. At first, I thought it was a dream, but when the person increased his force in tapping me, I was forced to open my eyes, and it was my mother. Mama, was fully dressed like someone traveling. "Mommy, good morning," I said sleepy. "Stand up and get dressed. We are going somewhere," my mother said. I wanted to say something, but seeing my mom's serious face, I kept quiet and peacefully did as she said. The early morning cold was terrible. I was lucky to have one jacket and trouser. If not, cold would have frozen my enemy. My mother didn't seem to care about the morning weather. She was only focused on going to our destination. Immediately we came out of the compound, I saw a cab waiting for us. It seems my mother had prepared already. We got into the cab and they took us off. We were on the road for about 2 hours before the cab pulled off in a lonely bush path. We came down. My mother spoke to the cabman and asked him to wait for us. Then my mom went to the booth of the cabman and brought out a big polythene bag. Although I couldn't see the contents, but I knew something was inside. The push part where the cab dropped us was lonely. Although the time was almost 7 a.m., but there was no one in sight. My mother asked me to pull my footwear and keep it in the car, that we were going to walk barefoot to our destination. Although my mother's reaction and talk were sounding funny to me, but I had no choice than to obey. We trekked for about 13 minutes before we arrived at a big river. The river was so big and long that it seems like it had no end. But that wasn't the shocking part. The most shocking part about what I saw was that this same river was the river I always visit in my dream. This wasn't funny any longer. What is happening to me? Why will I physically be in a place I always see in my dream? I looked at my mother. My mother didn't seem to notice me, because she walked to the front of the river and stood there, muttering some words I couldn't understand. When she was done, she poured out the contents in the polythene bag. Inside the bag was 3 Fanta bottles, 7 white candles, 2 native eggs, 1 big white powder, 2 matches, 3 fowl feathers, razor blade, and a white cloth. I stared at all these items with shock. What is my mother doing here with all these items? I said to myself. My mother removed her clothes and tied the white clothes, and she went close to the river with small water. My mother took the bowl and arranged all the items inside, except the razor blade. She carried the bowl on her head and stood in the river. She spoke in a strange language I couldn't understand. I couldn't believe my eyes. I always knew my mom to be a Christian, though she wasn't a regular churchgoer, but mom was a giver in the church. Mom had most times sponsored church donations, but the mom I was seeing is different from the mother I know. I just stood there watching my mother do her rituals and incantations. My mother muttered her incantations for a while and mentioned for me to come. I don't know if I was controlled or not, but I found myself walking to meet her in the river. Immediately I approached my mother. My mother took the basin from her head and used it to circle my head 7 times, saying, "Please don't use my daughter. Allow her to live her life instead, take me." My mother repeated for 7 times, then she used razor blade to cut herself. She allowed the blood flow into the basin, then she threw the basin into the river and walked out of the river holding my hands. Mom quickly changed her clothes and we journeyed back home. The drive back home was a quiet one. My mother didn't say anything to me or give me any explanation concerning what happened, and I was burning to ask my mother what happened back there. We arrived in front of our restaurant by 11 a.m. I was so hungry that immediately the cabman stopped. I jumped out of the cab and went into the restaurant to dish food for myself. My mom spent time discussing with the cabman. I sat down on a chair drinking the first sachet of water my hand touched, while waiting for my mom's girl to bring food for me. The morning scene kept replaying over and over in my head, like, damn, I don't understand. Is my mother into ritual? Is she a voodoo person? Why was my mother asking the river to leave me and take her? Or is my mother aware of what is happening to me? I was so confused. I had so many questions that needed to be answered, and it's only my mother that was capable of answering my question. My mother came into the restaurant and began inspecting the restaurant and the girls working. We had a busy day at the store. I guess I will not be able to talk to my mom till we get home. The day eventually came to an end, and I and my mom got home. We took our beds and had our evening meal. But before I could voice out what was on my mind, my mom spoke. Amara, I know there is a lot of questions you want to ask me, but it is better you don't get answers to those questions. Whatever you saw there should be a secret between us. I'm doing all I can do for us to live a good life and a comfortable life. I won't allow her to choose a path for you. Her? Mommy, who is her? I asked, confused, or is my mom referring to the lady in my dream? My mother gave me a weak smile. Amara, like I said, forget about what you saw. Believe in God. Pray to God everything will be alright. You can now go to bed, my mom said, and I left her room. I went to my room more confused than before. I should pray to God. My mom was just confusing me. I retired to my bed and I said my prayers and I slept off. I woke up the next morning with a happy smile. Guess what? I didn't see the woman in my dream, like I slept without dreaming. I ran to my mother's room excitedly. I got to my mother's room and knocked. When I heard her ask me to come inside, I greeted her. Good morning, my daughter. How are you? Hope you slept well. Mama, I slept well. Guess what? I didn't see the woman in my dream again. I said happily, thank God. Don't worry, you won't see her again. My mom said. We prepared for the store that day and life went on as usual. While my mom kept making sales in her shop, I kept thanking God for finally putting an end to this strange woman's encounter. Little did I know that my days of happiness was numbered. I woke up one fateful day. As I made to leave the bed, I felt something slimy touching my skin. At first, I thought I was sweating, but why would I be sweating on my leg this early morning? I mean, what kind of sweat would that be? I sat down properly on the bed to look at what was on my hand. Jesus Christ, Mommy, I shouted with all my strength. I didn't know how my voice was able to be loud as it sounded, but I saw what was bigger than me. Mommy, Mommy, I kept shouting. I could feel the fear vibrating in my body. I looked at my leg again, but it pushed me to keep shouting for my mom. My mom heard my voice and ran into my room. Amara, Ogini, my mom asked. The moment she entered, I raised my fearful face and pointed to my leg. Immediately, my mother saw a tiny snake that had crawled itself carefully around my left leg. My mom shouted, "Ah, I am finished," my mom said, crying. I was still shaking in fear because I was expecting my mom to do something like call for help or try to remove the snake. Instead, my mom sat on the bed close to me and started crying. "Mommy, my leg, please remove the snake." My mom looked at me. I could see the pain in her eyes. Her tears was visible on her fair face. "Amara, my child, I am so sorry that I couldn't protect you. I tried so hard for you not to live this kind of life, but it's like it is in our family for generations," my mother said sadly. "Mama, what are you saying? Please just remove the snake," I said in a tearful voice. The snake, as if it was hearing what I was saying, coiled itself tighter on my skin. My mother took a deep breath. "Amara, there is no option than for you to meet your chi." "Chi? Mommy, which chi?" I asked. "Amara, the woman you always say in your dream is your chi. It is time for you to go and meet her," my mother said. I look at the snake on my leg. I look at my mother. Oh my God, what is happening here? "Mama, please, if you know what is happening to me, please tell me. Why is all these things happening to me? Why has this woman been visiting my dream? Why did we go to the river that day? Why is this snake here and why are you asking me to go and meet that woman?" I asked in anger and confusion and pain. My mother looked at me. "Amara, my grandfather, your great-grandfather, as of then worshipped idols, and there was a time that your great-grandfather's wife couldn't give birth. People were mocking him and calling him impotent and barren generation. Your great-grandfather was so embarrassed that he had to make sacrifice in a river, asking his gods to bless his wife with a child. Fortunately, after a year, they were blessed with a female child who became their only child. The insult stopped, but the gossip was always there. People started gossiping on who would inherit your great-grandfather's properties when he died without having a male child. This was another problem to your great-grandfather until your grandmother, which happens to be my mom, got to a marriageable age. That was when my mom, your grandmother, decided not to marry but give birth in her great-grandfather's house. My mom refused to get married but had me and my brother out of wedlock and decided to continue serving her father's idol in order to continue his legacy. I was 5 years old when my mom started carrying me to her shrine. I helped my mother in arranging her god's house, and that was how the call of water came to me. I was 8 years old when my mom built a shrine for me close to the river, making me a daughter to the water god and deity. As their daughter, I was not allowed to get married, but I can have fun with men and give birth. But never was I to be called a man's wife. My mother paused to look at me. I guess she saw the look of shock on my face, so she continued her story. I wasn't allowed to get married at first. I thought it wasn't a big deal. After all, I can live my life like a normal human being. But once in a while, I'll go to the river for my yearly sacrifice. Some years later, my mother died. I met your dad, who was a Christian. We were in a relationship when your dad asked me to marry him. I refused at first when I remembered my family covenant with the water spirit. But your dad believed in God and always talked to me about Christ and salvation. After much plead and preaching, I decided to break all yokes and get married to your dad. Your dad introduced me to his pastor, who conducted a deliverance for me, and we got married. At first, I was scared, expecting something bad to happen, but nothing strange happened in my marriage life. After 2 months of marriage, I got pregnant. On the day of my delivery, the day I gave birth to you, it was that day that your father died, my mom said, crying. At this point of my mother's story, my mind began to calculate something. Mommy, how can you say Dad died the day I was born? Dad died when I was 8 years old. I remember well. I said, confused. My mother shook her head sorrowful. Richard wasn't your father. How God hates me. If the man I knew wasn't my father, then what exactly is happening here? Oh my God. So many bad and shocking news in 1 hour. Richard is not your dad, Amara. Amara, your dad died the day you were born. Richard was just a friend who volunteered to play the role of a father to you. And just when he was planning to get married to me, that was when he died. And by then you were 8 years old. It was then I was convinced that their deaths had something to do with my family's covenant. And since then, I chose to remain single and take good care of you. But now, it seems like they have chosen you to worship them. Amara, I am sorry, my mom said, crying. It was there that I knew that I am so doomed. So my life has already been programmed, already by covenant I knew nothing of. I looked at my mother and the snake which was still on my leg. After much talk from my mom, I agreed to go to the river and meet my chi. If not for anything, at least for the snake to be removed from my leg. My mom hurriedly took her bait and got stressed. The fear of being in the bathroom with a snake didn't allow me to take my bait. I just got a wrapper and tied it on top my nightwear so that people won't notice the snake on my leg. Immediately we came out of our building, we saw the same cab waiting for us. It was the same cab that took us to the river before. I was beginning to wonder if the relationship between my mom and the cabman, but I wasn't in a good mood to talk to my mom. The drive was a silent and quiet one. My mom sat down with a sad face, tears flowing down her face, which she cleaned at intervals. I sat with a confused mind. I can't believe how my peaceful life changed in an interval of 1 hour. By 9 a.m., we arrived at the bush path. I got down from the cab. I pulled and kept my slippers in the cab and was barefoot. I stood in front of the bush path, waiting for my mom to come down from the cab so we can proceed. My mom came down after some time, wearing her slippers. "Mommy, you didn't pull your slippers. I thought you said you will walk barefoot." I asked her. At this point, I was trying to control my anger. "Amara, I am not going with you today. This is your destiny. It is your call, so you have to go alone," my mom said in a sad voice. If anger was a person, it would be me. For a moment, I forgot the person standing in front of me was my mother, and I raised my voice. "Are you okay? Isn't it enough that you have destroyed my life with your useless family tradition? Now you want to push me to her as a sacrifice. Instead of you to follow me and tell her to leave me alone, you are sending me to her," I said angrily. I don't know what made me to shout and talk to my mother, but my little voice and my heart was ripping with pain, disappointment, anger and fear. My mother looked at me with pain. My words hit her like a straight bullet. Her tears, which she was trying to hide, rushed out of her eyes like a river. The pain and sorrow on her face was visible. But I don't care. I cleaned my own tears and walked to the bush path to go and meet the so-called Chi. It took me 15 minutes to arrive at the river bank. The place was just as it had always been in my dream. But I noticed that at the front of the river was the basin, and inside the basin was all the items my mom had put inside earlier. I was so scared because I remembered my mom had thrown the basin inside the river. Then how come the items are still in the basin? I noticed a white cloth was on top of the basin. Suddenly, I felt something entering inside me, or more like someone pushed me. I saw myself picking the clothes and I tied the white wrapper on my wrapper. I carried the basin on my head and I started dancing and singing in the water. It was as if I was born for this, because I danced and chanted words I had no idea of. After dancing for a while, I took the white powder in the basin and rubbed on my neck and my face. I took the razor blade on the basin. I cut my finger and allowed my blood to touch the river. I took the Fanta drink. I drank a little and I sprinkled the rest inside the river. I took the 2 eggs and I broke them in front of the water. Everything happened within a twinkle of an eye. I did all this like someone familiar with it. When I was done, I took my bait in the river. It was when I got out of the water, I regained myself. I looked at my leg and the snake was gone. Thank God, I muttered to myself. I was a little relieved, knowing that the snake was gone. But when I remembered that my life was also gone, I lost all form of hope. My life was never the same after that day. Most importantly, my relationship with my mother ended. Although my mother tried to win my trust and affection back, but to me, I was seeing her as someone who had destroyed my future. My hatred for my mother grew every day. The more my mom tried to bring our mother-daughter relationship back, the more hatred I had for her. My source of joy was visiting the river. I don't know why, but anytime I feel so sad, I always have the urge to go to the river. My mother noticed my urge to visit the river and ensured the cabman was always available to take me to the river anytime I want. But one fateful day, something happened. My mother had gone to her restaurant. I was alone at home. I stopped following my mother because her presence irritated me, so I prefer staying alone in the house. My mother always made sure she stocked the fridge with different kinds of food, mostly my favorites, so I can eat whatever I want. That fateful day, I went to take my bath, so when I was done, I came to my room and I was rubbing cream on my body, when I noticed that on my left thigh was a snake tattoo. Jesus Christ, I shouted in fear. I never liked tattoo, but seeing a snake tattoo on my thigh is something else, and knowing that the tattoo is a mark from the river spirit was another thing. I looked at the tiny but bold tattoo on my left thigh. I didn't know when tears started coming out of my eyes. I looked at my Bible that was on top of my dressing table. I walked to the table and picked up my Bible. Oh God, I am sorry. I never expected my simple life to be like this. God, please have mercy. I don't want to go to hell. This is not the way I planned my life. I was saying this word with tears, pain and bitterness. I know what it means to serve man-made gods. I know the final punishment is hell. But this man-made God seems so powerful. For it to be able to manipulate my family and even cage me. I looked at my Bible in my hands. I lost hope. Yes, I lost hope. I had always believed in God. I had grown up as a Christian, yet God allowed the river spirit speak on my life. God allowed my father that believed in him to die. God allowed a snake to tangle my leg, and God still allowed a tattoo to appear on my thighs. If God loved me, why doesn't he fight for me? I thought Isaiah 54 verse 17 said, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." But the weapons of my family's generation prospered in my life. As I was reflecting on this, I was crying, and I cried so hard, realizing the fact that God doesn't care for me. I felt like a sacrifice. I felt used. I felt God doesn't care about me. Yes, I'm sure he doesn't know I exist. I cried so hard until my eyes was red and fluffy. I cried until I fell asleep. I found myself walking in the river. Then I noticed, instead of my legs to touch the river, I was floating on top. But when I looked at the river, I saw my mom being tied to a snake. I saw my grandma in the river. She was holding a snake, asking me to enter the river. Just as I was about to enter the river, I saw a man who dragged me and took me to the river bank. It was when my leg touched the land I woke up from my sleep. I looked around and I discovered I was still naked. It was then it dawned on me that I had fallen asleep crying. I looked at the clock and the time was 6 p.m. Jesus Christ, I overslept. My mom would be home soon. I quickly got up from the floor and changed into my evening nightwear. Then I remembered the dream. Who was that man that stopped me from entering the river? All through the night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering about the dream I had and the snake tattoo on my thighs. I tossed on my bed. I checked the time. It was 11:30 p.m. I didn't know what to do by that time. Assuming me and my mom was in good terms, I would have gone to her room for her to pet me to sleep. I looked around the room. I saw my Bible lying on the floor. I went and picked it up. Just as I was about to drop it, a piece of the Bible fell out. I bent down to pick it up. I read the verse on the Bible. It was Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you that are worried and burdened. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. I don't know how I felt reading this passage, but this is a Bible verse that I am very familiar with. But reading it at this moment was giving me a different meaning. That words, come to me all you that are worried and burdened, and I will give you rest. It touched my soul very well. Yes, I am very worried, and I am looking for rest. I'm burdened. All I need is to rest. But Jesus is asking me to allow him carry my burden so he can give me rest. My tears rolled down my eyes. I felt this passage was written for me, like I felt this particular verse was talking to me. I knelt down on the floor and I started singing songs of praise and worship. I sang in such a way I forgot life problem. I forgot about my family's confronts in my life. I forgot that there was a snake tattoo on my body. I forgot life in general. It was just me singing and praising the God who wants to give me rest. It seemed my voice was so loud that my mother came to my room, and while she saw me singing and praising God, she joined me without delay. We sang and praised God. After that, we conducted a prayer section. When praying, I felt so powerful. I felt the hotness of God. I felt God's presence in my room. I looked at my mother praying vigorously, and I was convinced God's grace will speak for me. That night brought and united me and my mother again. Immediately after prayers, I went off to sleep with a new and free mind. I went to bed with the belief that all is well and victory is mine. But then, the time was already 4:30 a.m. I woke up the next morning. The image of all the night's prayers flashed in my mind, and I was happy, believing all my problems came to an end during the prayers. But the moment my feet touched the ground, I saw something else. On my feet was a tiny native bead. that was tied to my leg in front of a leg chain. Me looking at it, I knew it was from the river. I looked at the bead on my leg, then I realized my prayer didn't work. So God was never interested in helping me. So all the things and presents I thought I felt was just a mind trick. I looked at the Bible on my bed. I picked it up with anger. I started tearing it. God, I know you don't love me. Yes, you don't love me. If you love me, you won't give me a fake hope. Why will you allow me to sing for you if you know you cannot solve my problem? I asked in anger and tears as I was busy tearing the Bible. Why did you allow me to talk to my mother, that winch, if you know you won't deliver me? So I'm now an instrument of fun to you and everyone. I asked with bitterness. Although I knew I was never going to get an answer, I still poured out my emotions. Tears ran down my eyes as I was tearing the Bible. At this junction, I was convinced that there was no hope for me. Yes, no hope. If God who created the heaven and earth can abandon me, who should I look up to? Just then, my mom walked in with a happy smile on her face. Immediately she saw my tears. My mom approached me and tried to touch me. I pushed her hands away. Don't touch me, I shouted in anger. My mom was pained by my reaction. Amara, what is it? Talk to your mother. What is going on? My mother asked in a quiet voice. Stay away from me. You are the cause of my problem. You know that I don't have a life of my own. Yet, you gave birth to me when you know I can't live my life. So, Mama, you plan to sacrifice me to what I don't know. You don't want me to ever get married and live a complete life. You want me to live a single life like you with no husband. I asked my mother with anger. Tears dropped out of my eyes. My mother was already crying. Amara, I am really sorry. I never wanted you to live this kind of life. It is not my fault. Amara, please forgive your mother. My mother said, crying. I should forgive you when I don't have a choice of my own. I wake up every day seeing different satanic marks and design on my body. Yet you want me to forgive you. Mama, your idol wants me to sleep around with men and not get married to any of them. Yet you want me to forgive you, Mama. I asked my mother with tears on my eyes. My mother couldn't answer me. Her tears was all over the places. She couldn't give me a reply. I wish you never gave birth to me. And since it was my wish, I'm going to make sure I put an end to it. I said and I walked out of the house. I was still wearing my pajamas when I was walking out of the house. I don't know where I am going, but I am sure I would end everything in a way no one will be affected.